Hello everybody and welcome back to Five Sisters Zoo. We're right here in the Lost Kingdom where we finished our video off last Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. I really hope you guys enjoyed the habitats and adaptations classes that we put out last Tuesday and Thursday. I've certainly loved seeing all the different pictures of snow leopards, meerkat habitats and plastic pollution posters that have been sent across to me, so keep them coming. There's going to be more activities go out with the lessons that we are putting out this week as well. And this week, today and on Thursday, it's all about the rainforest. Now the rainforest is a habitat that we didn't discuss much in our habitats and adaptations classes, and that was on purpose because we are going to be focusing on all things rainforests this week. Now we're going to be talking about tropical rainforests. There are some rainforests up in the northern parts of the world in places like Canada, but we are going to be focusing on tropical rainforests only. And tropical rainforests are found around the centre of the earth. So around that invisible line that we call the equator. We find them in South America, the Amazon rainforest. We find them across West Africa and Central Africa. We find them in Asia. And the world's oldest tropical rainforest is found in northern Australia. Now, those rainforests cover around about 6% of the Earth's surface. Not that much. Despite that, over half, so over 50% of the world's plant and animal species are found within those forests. It is absolutely incredible. Now, rainforests are very warm, humid places. Most tend to stay around about 28 degrees all the time, all year round. And we don't find the same kind of seasons within a rainforest as we do here in Scotland. So here in Scotland we have spring, we have summer, we have autumn, and we have winter. In a rainforest, you don't get those same seasonal changes. You do have times of the year where it's much wetter, which we would call a rainy season, and you have much drier times of the year, which would be referred to as a dry season. So we have those dry seasons, those rainy seasons, but it does tend to stay quite humid and quite warm all year round, which makes it absolutely perfect for life. And that's why there are so many species, that's such a diversity of species living in those places. Now in these lessons we are going to discuss some of the plant and animal species that we find living in the rainforest, how they survive there, why they call those rainforests home. We're going to talk a little bit about how rainforests are structured. So we'll discuss where in the rainforest some of those animals come from. Are they found down on the ground? Are they found high in the trees? We're going to talk a little bit about some of the threats that rainforests face as well. They are some of the most diverse places on Earth. Unfortunately, they're also some of the most threatened. And following on from our feel-good bear story last week, we are going to be talking about some more work that Five Sisters Zoo have become involved with. So this week we're going to be talking a little bit about one of our conservation partners, Seed Madagascar, and the work that they're doing to try and plant more trees in a tropical area of the world. And we're going to hear a little bit from them, hopefully, in our next video. So guys, I hope you're ready to travel to the rainforest with us this week. We're going to be starting off by looking at exactly where in the world we find those forests. I'm going to show you guys on a map now, and then we're going to be coming back over here to the Lost Kingdom to start looking at some of the larger animals that we might find living down on the ground. So in order to get a clearer idea of just where in the world we find tropical rainforests, we've nipped back over to our education centre. So I mentioned already that rainforests are around the centre of the Earth, around an invisible line that we call the equator. So we've got our fantastic map behind us here just now, and the equator is this line running right through the middle there. And tropical rainforests are found on either side of the equator. So we find them over here in South America. This is the Amazon basin right here. So this is the Amazon rainforest, a rainforest I'm sure a lot of you will have spoken about at school or may go on to speak about at some point. We also find rainforests over here in Central Africa and up here in West Africa as well. And we find animals like chimpanzees living in those rainforests. Then over here in Southeast Asia, so places like Indonesia, we've got Papua New Guinea down here as well, up in places like Thailand and in some parts of India too, we find these tropical rainforests. And as I've already mentioned, the oldest tropical rainforest in the world is down here in northern Australia. Yeah? So they're found right around the middle of the Earth. And if you can imagine the Earth as a big kind of ball, the centre, the equator, is on the sort of outer part of that. And so it's the part that heats up the most, which makes sense because we've already said that rainforests stay nice and warm and nice and humid all year round. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start focusing on some of those rainforest layers. We're going to go back over to the Lost Kingdom and we're going to start looking at some animals that we find living down near the ground. And we're going to start by looking at our West African dwarf crocodiles, a species that we find over here in West Africa, living in small pools on the forest floor. So, we have come into our West African dwarf crocodile habitat here at FSZ. It is so warm and humid in here, it's kept like that all the time. Now, unfortunately, we are not going to get a very good view of our crocodiles inside the enclosure here today. So we are going to head around, we're going to look in the main windows to see if we can spot them more clearly. And we're going to be joined by our keeper, Holly, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how they keep it just so warm in here and the kind of challenges behind all of that. So guys, we've come round now to the public side of the West African dwarf crocodile enclosure, and we can see them quite clearly in their lovely habitat here just now. So this is our male right down the front here. We do have a female, she's over at the back of the little kind of pool in there somewhere. Now West African dwarf crocodiles, as the name suggests, they come from West Africa. We find them living in rainforests over there in West Africa. They tend to live in smaller pools within those rainforest areas. And they do a lot of this. They do a lot of sitting around and waiting for prey to come to them. These guys aren't going to go miles and miles and miles to look for food. They're going to wait for food to come to them, and they're going to seize any opportunity that they can to grab something to eat. And normally we find these guys will eat small fish, they might eat small rodents and things like that that would be running around the sides of these pools. They are actually the smallest crocodile species, so they're not that big, but you can see the tail on this guy is still super powerful, and he still has a really, really strong set of jaws as well for grabbing hold of food and crunching away, eating it. Yeah, these guys will, they're absolutely fantastic predators in these pools within these rainforests that they live in. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're really lucky. We're actually joined by Holly, who is one of our reptile keepers, and she is going to tell us a little bit more about what it's like to look after some of the animals in here and just how she makes sure that this feels as much like a rainforest as possible. So we're joined by Holly over here just now. So Holly, can you tell us a little bit about your day? How do you make it feel like a rainforest in here? What do you get up to in order to do that?
So the most important thing to make it feel like a rainforest is probably the heat and the humidity of these enclosures. So the humidity is basically just the amount of water vapour in the air. So the whole building is heated. We've also got different heat lamps and basking spots for a lot of the animals. And the humidity is regulated as well. So for the bigger ones, we'll spray down with the hose, we'll sort of mist the enclosures if needs be. In some of the other enclosures we have little foggers, like for the amphibians, and also in a lot of the smaller enclosures we'll keep moss and things like that just keep things at the right humidity level to sort of mimic their natural environments.
Excellent, fantastic. Is it an easy job, or is it quite a difficult thing to do?
It's fairly tricky. You have to pay close control. Close attention to detail with things. So we take the temperatures and humidity levels and everything twice a day, just to make sure that everything's at the right level.
Amazing. Well, you're doing a fantastic job. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're actually going to get a close look at another kind of reptile. So the West African dwarf crocodiles that we've got in here, they belong to a group of animals called the reptiles, and we're going to have a close look at another kind of reptile now, and we're going to discuss just why it's so important for reptiles to stay nice and warm, and why the amazing work that Holly and the other keepers do in here in the Lost Kingdom is just so important for all of the reptiles that live in this building. So I am delighted to be joined by a very special animal here just now. This is Monty the royal python. Now, royal pythons don't just come from sort of forest areas. These guys are also found in sort of more open grassland and in more open woodland as well sometimes. We do have other pythons here that are strictly from rainforests, but they're all far too big for us to bring out. So we've got things like blood pythons that live here. You guys can go away and look them up. They come from over in Southeast Asia, but I would not be able to handle one of them by myself out here just now. So instead, I'm going to introduce you guys to Monty. Now, as I've already said, Monty is a royal python. Royal pythons come from over in Central and Western Africa. You can see him sticking his tongue out and in there just now. He's doing something very special with his tongue. These guys, they actually smell with their tongues. When he sticks his tongue out, he picks up all the little chemical cues floating around in the air. He sticks that back in his mouth and it rubs off the roof of his mouth. Just above the roof of his mouth is a really special organ called a Jacobson's organ, and that sends little impulses up to his brain, and that's how he figures out what other animals are nearby, if there's any food nearby too. So their sense of smell is absolutely incredible. That's how they find their way around, that's how they find all of their food, and it's also how they stay nice and safe as well. Now, I mentioned before that Monty was a reptile. So snakes and things like the crocodiles that we had a little look at a minute or two, they belong to a group of animals known as the reptiles, and in a couple of weeks' time we're going to be talking a bit more about animal classification. So we'll go into more depth in one of our future lessons about how we classify reptiles, mammals, birds, things like that. But for now, all you guys need to know is Monty is a reptile. He's covered in scales, he is a reptile. And he's also what we call ectothermic. What does that mean? That sounds like a bit of a complicated word. You guys might have heard snakes being referred to as cold-blooded before. But in this video, we are going to refer to Monty as ectothermic instead. All that means is that this guy here cannot generate his own body heat. So he needs to live in a nice warm environment in order to stay nice and warm himself. Hence the reason we find so many reptiles, so snakes, crocodiles, lizards, living in tropical rainforests, where it stays nice and warm and nice and humid all year round. It's a lot more difficult for reptiles to live places like Scotland, where it gets very cold in the winter months. And again, that's why it's so important that Holly keeps our fantastic rainforest here at Five Sisters Zoo nice and warm and nice and humid as well, in order to replicate those climatic conditions. Monty's absolutely fantastic. I'll let you in on a little story of mine. Snakes are probably one of my favourite animals. Unfortunately, they're very misunderstood. A lot of people are quite frightened of snakes, but they are absolutely phenomenal animals. They're actually the animals that got me into doing what I'm doing now. I absolutely adore snakes, and I always have done from a very young age. And it's an honour to be able to hold Monty here just now. He is absolutely incredible. Now these guys, obviously we mentioned a second ago, he sticks his tongue out and in and he'll smell with that tongue, and that's how he's going to find his food. These guys are normally going to eat things like small rodents and maybe some small birds from time to time as well. Monty that we've got here, he is a constrictor, which basically means he's going to wrap around that food. He's going to catch it, wrap around it, give it a big tight squeeze. He's able to crush it, suffocate it, and then swallow that food whole, which is an amazing thing to be able to do. So he can fit a whole rat into that mouth. He can swallow it whole, and it normally takes him a good few days to digest that meal properly. And one thing that we're careful about here at the zoo is that we aren't handling this guy right after he's eaten. So after he's eaten a big meal like that, we leave him a few days before we go picking him up. And that way he's not going to get an upset stomach. Now normally, in a sort of rainforest area, a big heavy python would be found either down on the forest floor, or sometimes we might find some snakes making their way up into the kind of understory level, so the next level up, where there's lots of branches for them to kind of hang out on. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to head outside and we're going to meet one more animal from the forest floor, and this time we're going to meet quite a big mammal, so a hairy animal that we find living down on the forest floor over in South America. So guys, we have been allowed very special access into our tapir indoor area, and we're joined today by Manny, our male Brazilian lowland tapir. Now, I am wearing a mask again at the moment. Please excuse me, it's not a reusable one. I had to put one of these temporary ones on just now in order to come in here. But please remember, the same thing from our last video still stands. I totally advise you guys to use a reusable mask whenever possible. Now, Manny here, as I've already said, he's a Brazilian lowland tapir. These guys come from over in the Amazon rainforest and the surrounding parts of South America. So we find these guys both living in rainforests and out in sort of swamp areas as well, so out in marshy swamp areas. And you can see that his incredible kind of nose here that's twitching away there just now is modified in such a way you can actually kind of lift that up, almost a little bit like a trunk. You can stick it above the water, so if he's ever moving through a marsh or moving through a kind of river system where the water's quite deep, he can stick that above the water and he'll use it a bit like a snorkel in order to breathe, which is an incredible adaptation when you're living in a very humid, very wet environment like these guys will live in out there in South America. Now, in Africa, in some of the rainforests over there in Africa, we find large mammals, large hairy animals, things like elephants, yeah, that will go around, they'll grab fruits from trees, and they'll also kind of clear pathways, and they'll be able to disperse those seeds from those fruits, and that allows more trees and plants to grow. And in South America, tapirs like this guy here are probably one of the largest mammals still left. We used to have big mammals on the same sort of scale as elephants over there in South America, giant sloths, things like that. But nowadays, we don't. They've all gone extinct. And we're left with animals like tapirs. They're absolutely beautiful, but obviously nowhere near the same size as an elephant. But they're still really, really important for spreading seeds around within those rainforest areas. And without tapirs like Manny here, many trees, many plants over there in South America wouldn't be able to survive. They wouldn't be able to reproduce because there wouldn't be an animal to spread the seeds around. Tapirs are absolutely incredible. They live down on the forest floor, just like the crocodiles that we were having a little look at a little while ago. We're certainly not going to find these guys up in the understory, like the royal python that we had a little chat about. These guys are much too heavy for that, and they're certainly not very good climbers at all. So down on the forest floor is where we find them. Now, we're going to finish our lesson up over here today with Manny, and we're going to be back with you guys on Thursday. And on Thursday, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the animals that live further up in the trees, up in the canopy level, and in the emergent layer as well. So we're going to be looking at some of our primates, our monkeys and lemurs, and maybe even a lesser ape species too. And we'll also focus on some of our bird species. Not only that, we're also going to have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the threats facing the rainforest, the human threats, talk a little bit about deforestation and ways of combating that as well. And we're going to introduce you guys to Seed Madagascar on Thursday, a fantastic organisation that is doing some amazing work to help protect forests over there on the island of Madagascar. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this lesson today, and I look forward to seeing you all again on Thursday. Thank you from me, and thank you from Manny here as well.